Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Madhu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. And this is the online Mbongi. And today we have a special guest with us, Jean-Philippe Gourdine, who is a glycobiologist out of Portland, Oregon. Today is Friday, October the 16th, and it is Black Science Month. So all that and more when we return in a second. Indeed, welcome again, family. Sorry for this random light in the background. Hopefully we can do something about that a little later. But again, it is Friday the 16th, and we have a very, very special guest with us today. But before I introduce our guest, a few announcements. Again, for those who have not been privy with us over the last few shows, for a while I did not have a name for this particular program in which I, interview prominent scholars and do presentations and the like. And so I have decided to call it the Mbongi, which is a Kikongo word out of Central Africa. That refers to a place of learning, and it is also a political institute in Kasai. And there are various different pronunciations of this term around the Bantu Congo, and they are known by different names. But the Mbongi itself, again, is an institute of learning and of politics, and it is where the elders in the community come together to learn, about the world, and also to hash out issues that pertain to the community. So, I deem this space, I envision this space as being exactly that, for the global community and online learners such as myself. So when you see this logo and you see this name, understand, what it represents. And I'll probably do a whole show kind of explaining the cosmology behind the logo. But, so that's first and foremost. And secondly, on this Sunday, I mentioned that it is Black Science Month, and this is a month of celebration of science and African people in the sciences and the promotion of African Americans and African people around the world into the sciences to encourage, younger people to get into the sciences, as well as for adults who may not necessarily see themselves as in the career field of the various different sciences, but want to become more scientifically literate. And so that's what the purpose of this month is, aim to do, or one of the main aims to do. And so with that said, this is one of the co-founders of Black Science Month. I am also a co-founder, and there's two others who we will get on the show in due time. But this Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we have with us Dr. Sadiqa Watson, who is a data analyst and statistician. might as well say mathematician as well. And we're going to learn about her journey, you know, what it took to get to where she's at, what she does, and, you know, some possible paths for those who may be interested or want to break down the learning barriers that they perceive when it comes to mathematics and the like. So, you know, be on the lookout for that this coming Sunday. And then on the 29th of this month, which is, I think, is a Thursday, we have with us the great Dr. Wade Nobles, who is a psychologist, you know, currently residing in California. And, you know, one of the legendary, you know, movers and shakers, one of the originators of the Black psychology as a field, and, you know, the organization by the same name, the Organization of Black Psychologists, and also the Journal of Black Psychology, and a whole host of other things. So we're going to, you know, it's been about 5 years since we had him on the show. And so we're going to get some updated information on works that he's dealing with, some insights into current perspectives, you know, and the like. And lastly, for those who want to, you know, continue to support this particular channel, as well as contribute to the upcoming documentary film, I did a show kind of outlining what that entails, and I'll have different shows giving you updates and the like. The documentary film titled Guyana Into, and it's going to discuss the relationship between ancient Egyptian language, culture, philosophy, and religion, and that of the Bantu, current modern day Bantu speakers from Central, East, and Southern Africa. And so that will be the part one of the documentary. Then part two, we deal with the relationship between ancient Egypt and West Africa. And so if you want to, you know, help to see this documentary come into fruition, you know, please consider, you know, joining and being a contributor via the Patreon, you know, page. So that's patreon.com/Asar Imhotep. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you our guest, Dr. Jean-Philippe Gourdine, who is currently a senior research associate at the Oregon Health and Science University at the Oregon Clinical and Translational Institute, and part of the Dr. Lisa Karsten's lab. He has obtained his PhD in marine molecular biology and biochemistry at the University of Antilles of Guyana, now which is the University of Antilles. With Dr. Juliet Smith Raven in 2006. From 2006 to 2008, he held a research and teaching position in the UAG Martinique Grenoble at the Center of Research, or the Research Center of Macro Molecules. What is that? The vegetal macromolecules, the CERMAV, with Dr. Ann Emberty, as well as Dr. Gourdine was hired at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, in Dr. Richard Cummings' lab, now at the National Center for Functional Glycomics in Harvard. And he's going to let us know a little bit of what glycobiology is. And so with me not murdering any more of this bio, I'd like to welcome to the program Dr. Gourdine. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you all who are listening live, who are in the chat and in the who are catching the archives. You know, this show is for you. So make sure that when you have any questions, try to reserve them towards the end a little bit. But if you just have to get it out, just type it in. Hopefully I will see it. and I will ask our guest. And so, as always, I'd like to acknowledge our people who are in the chat. So, peace to I am Pablo, or I am not Pablo, Donnie Williams, Alexander Davenport, Lions Times Baby, Monta X, Conan Lee, all the way in UK, J Cal Gaming, Non-Swirl Zone, and Sister Tamika. Thank you all, and then all of you who are on Facebook, and then all of you who are actually listening live on the new Black Science Month channel on YouTube, this is also simultaneously being broadcast. So without further ado, again, thank you, Dr. Gourdine, for coming on.
You're welcome.
So the first question I have, since this you are new to this channel in general, and to the people who listen, can you give us a little bit about your background in terms of where you're from, where you grew up, and then what got you interested into the particular scientific field that you are currently in now? Okay,
great. So I'm from a small island in the Caribbean called Guadeloupe. So I like to refer to it as a Haiti who did not succeed. Let me explain to you. So we are from the French Caribbean, like Haiti was a French colony too. We had also some revolution about the same time with the Haitian Revolution, but the Haitian Revolution was successful and we were not successful. At least for 4 years, Guadeloupe was independent. But after Napoleon Bonaparte sent his troop and reestablished slavery for, again, 40 years. So we are still French in the French Department from Overseas. With some benefit and some issues with like this dual identity as I would say, a W.E.B. Du Bois described pretty well for the African-American communities. So I was born and raised in this island, and I would say that I had a pretty typical general science training. I did geology, biology. But what got me really interested in more into genetics, like two elements. So first of all, my mom was really sick. She had a brain cancer. And I was trying to figure out what happened, what are the new research out there. So I was like really involved in learning a lot into biology. And the second point that also led me to this coming to the US initially, it's my love for African history and the fact that in the US, our African American brothers have to work a lot to have the history of Africa taught in some universities, having some Black studies. And what really changed my mind and really interested me into science and history of Africa was one of the book of Cheikh Anta Diop, Nation Nègre et Culture, Nation Nègre and Culture. And I wanted to go further and what he had into linguistic and in cultural anthropology and get some more data with the biology that I was learning at the time. And long story short, I ended up doing my PhD on tropical clam that lives in symbiosis with the bacteria. So I changed trajectory momentarily to get my PhD. Then I was thinking of doing a postdoc in France in ancient DNA studies, but finally, because of job opportunities, I stayed in the field of glycobiology, which I'm going to explain to you pretty soon also. And like as I was saying in my bio, I was able to get hired at Emory University because of my different publication and work here in the US, then moved here in Portland, Oregon, where my wife is from initially. So I have not left the interest for African history to a point like I'm showing you in the background. As you can see, I've been a co-editor and also of the Cahier Caribéen d'Egyptologie, which is a Caribbean Egyptology magazine, which is like a peer-reviewed Egyptology magazine. And I was trained under a Alain Ancelin, who was one of the second Martinican and Guadeloupean Egyptologists. So even if I didn't get a formal degree in Egyptology, I was trained with him, and we started a multidisciplinary group called ANCU, which involve Egyptologists, biologists, and we are trying to decipher the ancient history of Africa, including, of course, a Kemet or ancient Egypt.
Indeed. Yes, I was just about to acknowledge. I see those journals in the back, and I see the UNC journal too, the one by headed by Dr. Teofilo Benga.
Yeah,
as well. And so, before we move forward, you know, when I saw glycobiologist, I'm like, this is new. I've never, heard of this. And so, for those who didn't Google it, what does all of that entail?
So if I tell you glycobiology, what comes to your mind first?
Well,
beside biology, the glyco part,
like glycerin and enzyme. I don't know, like, I purposely did not look it up just so I could hear it directly, say it from you.
So a lot of people ask me like glycan, glucose. Yeah, it has the same etymology.
Sugar.
Yeah, sugar. So glycobiology is just the science or related to sugar, and the main culprit that everybody talked about is glucose. But what you have to know and have to remember after this interview, if you want to remember one thing about glycobiology, is it's everywhere. So our blood group type A, B, O, those are different types of sugar that are decorated on the lipids and proteins. So different types of sugars that are there. The flu viruses, for instance, the way the flu viruses will bind to our lung is going to be through sugars also. So to a point, all the different types of flu viruses are called H1N1, H5N1, etc. So H stands for a hemagglutinin, which is one type of protein that binds to sugar, and N stands for neuraminidase, which is an enzyme that cuts some sugars. So that's another example of how glycobiology is. So I did my work, particularly for my PhD, on one protein that binds to some sugar that are represented in some bacteria. And I moved after that working on interaction of some human protein that binds to some bacterial glycan, some bacterial sugars also. So now I'm working more into microbiology, in particularly the microbiome, the human microbiome. So we are not alone on our body. We just host a bunch of microbes everywhere. And I work now particularly on the human bladder. So the bladder also has its own microbe, healthy microbe that are there. And a lot of these interactions involve like sugars from our own self, or from the bacteria.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I'm getting ready to do a presentation on the concept of deity in the African world, and how, by definition, after doing a linguistic analysis, in many respects, for a lot of the cultures, it is, basically any entity that cannot be seen but can do work. Right. And by definition, scientific definition, that would also kind of count as a definition for energy, but or the ability to do work. That's the definition for energy. But how we can kind of update those concepts in a modern world. And so if we understand the deity as defined by African people in these different places to be that, you would include those microbes, those other entities that work inside of us. And so they would need, like we always talk about sacrifices, saying to the deities and or offerings, if you want to use those words. But there are certain types of offerings that these microbes and things would need in order to work, best on our behalf, so to speak. So, I wanted to show like what enzymes or whatever, microbes and things need to work properly, in the body, and what we need to offer ourselves and the deities within so that they could do, their job or whatnot. But it's interesting because, for example, Amadou Hapatiba out of Mali, well known. He would talk about amongst the Bambara and the Fulani that they have this concept of the people of the person. Like there's just no one entity, that there's a multitude of entities. And as I would say, in for people who grew up in the States and know about this, that all of these different entities come together and form like Voltron. And I don't know, if y'all got Voltron, out there, in the 80s, in the early 90s, but that come and create this one entity that seems like one entity, but is really, a community of things. And so
that's, I just want to interject there. There is this belief of like separation between like some religious concept and science. And as I was talking with my wife about that, I think Dr. Amamazama, she mentioned that in one of her book. Even people like Descartes, who he's the father of, in Europe, of what is called the rational thinking. He came up with this idea of rational thinking. I think, therefore I am, during a mystical dream. And the creator of the guy who understood how the benzene is organized, the molecule of benzene, which is like a circular molecule based on carbon, he had this idea of the Ouroboros, the snakes that bite his tail as a circle. And there are a lot of concepts which are in the ancient world that exist as a ancient religion that can mimic a lot of things that we can see like nowadays with more accurate methods. But what I want to say, I just want to say that we don't have like to ditch and to put away all the knowledge from ancient civilization, our ancestors, but understand the concept and what they mean, and adapt to something that is like more accurate with our scientific knowledge now. So this I know that's.
And given that this is, for us Black Science Month, how important for you is it that more of us, regardless of where we are in the diaspora, learn more about the sciences and get into the fields? What has been your experience in, because you're the first glycobiologist that I've ever, at least to my knowledge, that I've, ever met. But I'm pretty sure that in your field, there are a lot more, but don't necessarily look like, you. So, how important is it for more of us to, regardless of what the field is, to get into the sciences? And what do you think are some barriers that may keep a lot of us from even pursuing, those fields of study?
So I would say representation matter. Representation matter, and it's really important to have people that look like us in all the fields, because I take the example of a cousin that I have. When he was younger, all the medical doctors he used to see were only people of European descent. And when he had a first black doctor, he was shocked and he couldn't trust. Like, wow, we have people like, and that's exactly the issue. We have to have representation everywhere in all discipline of sciences. Till now, in Portland, Oregon, there is 6% of people of African descent in Portland, Oregon, because of racist law that was created when the state were created by the European descent colonizers. And black people were forbidden from being in Oregon, for instance, unless if they had 100 lashes. They had to be beaten to stay. And after you have the redlining and so on. And we've been like in the back. Even if black people have contributed like to their Oregon history as well as a Native American. And to this day, some people are still shocked at my university. When I was hired, some people asked me if I work here, regardless of me having the badge, telling my name, my position. So representation matter. It's important based on the history, no matter where we are from in the diaspora. If you're like a native, African American, or if we are like me from the Caribbean diaspora, we have to have representation because science is so far the best tool that we have. That I think that humanity has created. One of the best tools to understand nature. And I like to take Dr. Obenga's definition of mathematics based on the ancient Egyptian definition, which is like the method to understand the world, the method to understand nature. And I think with all the advance that we have to understand nature, all the knowledge that we have to have our people represented everywhere in all discipline. Until this day, there is a huge movement, and I advise people who are interested in science, Black people interested in science, to go on Twitter, which has been a really great ally for helping underrepresented group to be out there. So they can look at the hashtag Black Scientists, Black in Science, Black in any kind of discipline, physics. I have to start the Black in glycobiology because there are so few of us. Because glycobiology is like a subclass of biochemistry.
Yeah.
So, but representation matters. So it's really important to have to interest our the next generation to science and have our representation.
Before I do, if you can just move slightly to your right.
No.
In center in the camera. Okay, there you go. Because your face was getting cut off.
Okay.
No problem. I appreciate it. Thank you. So what were some of the classes that you had to take, and what were your most difficult classes, and then what did you do? What strategies did you implement to be able to go through and excel in those difficult courses?
Mm-hmm. Let me think. So I think physics, for many biologists in general, they are not as good at physics compared to other people. Mm-hmm. So sometimes physics was a little bit harder for myself, but the way when I was in undergrad, but the way for me to fight and to understand all the concepts and also the exercise I was given, it was repetition. And so repetition, making sure that I have, like, for instance, either people like my brother, who's also a scientist, who's is more into biomathematics, so he could help me if something was wrong. So mentorship is like definitely really important. That's one stuff. If you can't have mentorship, surround yourself with like I have books, have references where it's going to be easier for you to get it. Have exercises and keep on. The repetition is the only way to succeed. Is repeat on and on until you get the concept. So I would say that was like that. Those three parts. So having mentors, make sure you can have like access to books and to exercise and keep on repeating. And I will always remember one of my favorite teacher of biochemistry, who was from Benin. He liked to joke and say that even in the restroom, have your book. Even if the restroom, have your book. Even if it's like the hardest part for you to understand, keep on reading, and that's the best way.
Indeed. Now you mentioned it seems like that, you know, sugar, the fundamental element of it all is very important to more than we thought. So, you know, us laypersons, when we think of sugar, we're just thinking of what goes into our soft drinks, you know, what's in our cakes, you know, or whatnot. But what role does the sugar play, just, you know, on Earth, and why is it important in these different? Why is it so important for these different processes, you know, of the body?
So I would say that sugar has like different properties. So energy storage, for instance. So like starch is one of the most abundant type of sugar that exists. So for plants, that's what it is. For us, we also store our energy under the form of glycogen, which is an association of a small protein and a polymer of glucose. So a lot of glucose associated together. So we store that in our skeletal muscles or also in our liver. So we have like energy. But also sugars are important for cell recognition. So self, like I was telling you about the A, B, O group, the differences between those. So A, B, and O, those are based on sugar. So recognition also. They are involved also in protein folding. So a protein, when it's synthesized, so from the DNA to the RNA to the protein, if a protein has to be like well folded. We think of protein like in a linear way, but it's more of a globular, or you have to have a three-dimensional representation of this molecule. And sugar are often involved in these processes also. So, and we use the term sugar as a generic term, but we have like a diversity of sugar. I was telling you about the paper that we write on. It's a type of sugar. Cellulose is a type of sugar also. So sugars are everywhere, and we have like different linkage that will make it digestible or not, or have different functions.
Is it true that when we consume wheat, that it goes through a chemical process and becomes sugars as well?
When we eat wheat?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have like from the starch form, and first of all, you have one of the form of the starch, and when we cook it, it's gonna change also. Like you can see that with like a oatmeal. So the way it's gonna be cooked, the sugar are gonna be like different, and it's gonna be digestible. And after when we're gonna eat those sugar, we have some enzyme that will chop off into smaller sugar molecules. So yeah.
Now I want to kind of switch it a little bit, because you mentioned Dr. Alain Anselin, and you know, he is someone who I've had the privilege to correspond with over a number of years, and he has been very helpful, in my studies, regarding linguistics and Egyptology. You had a more personable relationship, with him. Can you tell us, a little bit about who he is and how was he as a person, and then his areas of expertise?
Yeah, so Alain, he passed away in May 2019 already. A year has passed.
Mm-hmm.
And Alain was for me, he was a more than a mentor. He was kind of like not only a father figure for me in not only in research, but also through the hardship of life. And so Alan was trained in. He did his PhD initially about the Fula people, and he had another hypothesis about how where the Fula were from. He thought they were from India, and he had some good exchange with Cheikh Anta Diop actually, and he had in his PhD defense somebody who was like at this time. Big racist in France, like somebody who would be like compared to, I don't know, like a Steve Bannon with a PhD type of guy. But he always wanted to confront. He wanted to say, as Cheikh Anta Diop was saying, if you have the same education, if you have the same knowledge, if there is an issue there, somebody from India, Africa, wherever in the world, would use his brain or her brain and solve this issue. And we all should be able to double check and say, yeah, this really makes sense. It follows the logic. So that's the reason why he wanted to invite this kind of guy in his PhD to say, I'm going to show you based on scientific method that you're wrong, respectfully. So he was like really smart in a way of, like he was telling me, when you're in a desert, you don't fight with your enemy for a bottle of water if your enemy has the water. So he always used this method and say like, we have in a way to discuss with the people who are against our own and show them they are wrong, respectfully, but use logic. And I really enjoy the way he proceeded, and he was able like to discuss with people who have like a complete opposite view than he's about Egypt, ancient Egypt peopling. He made his own mistakes, like I was saying about India, but like he was saying, somebody who does research makes some mistakes. It's inevitable. You have to acknowledge and be humble that while looking for the truth, you might be misled, and it's fine because scientific research is not a church. Yeah. It's not the truth is not like anchor in the sacred books. The truth is anchor in question, and he always told me, keep questioning. Even if you find an answer, question your answer and say like, what if I'm wrong? And keep on answering. So Alain, he taught me some basic in Egyptology when I was in Martinique, when I was teaching already. He interviewed also some people who were in linguistics. And I don't know if you may know Dr. Gabor Takacs from Hungary.
Yes.
He invited him to come to Martinique, and actually, you may know Aimé Césaire, one of the greatest poets in Martinique, was also a politician. Césaire met him also, and Alain was like really was a humanist and trying to see the best of everybody, even people who are against his own idea. But he liked to confront respectfully, people who might have like different ideas, but said with reason and logic, we'll find the truth. So I've learned that from him, and he's been supportive of people who might have been like on the wrong side of the research, opposite side of what he was doing, but he was giving knowledge and say like, you can try that. I disagree with that, but here's how the document that I have. This is what I found, and sharing knowledge.
Indeed. And, that's something that, I know you're not engrossed in what we call the conscious community, out here in the United States, but there are people who believe that just because someone of great stature, in any particular field, has come up with a hypothesis or a theory that, it is right and exact because they have the necessary training and prestige in that field. When, if you were to have a conversation with them, they would always say exactly what you say in terms of, being humble and that they could be wrong. Even, the great Shekanti Diop, who, encouraged in his writings for people not to simply believe what he say, but to test it and basically to expand and create research teams, to do more precisely the work that he was, pioneering, back in those days. And so I definitely see that, with Dr. Anselin, and his particular works. And so, you mentioned the journal, when did this start, and what is the future of the journal now that, he has passed?
So the journal had the Cahier Caribbean d'Egyptologie had started in the year 2000. But before, Alain has been publishing a lot with Tianaba, this Tianaba edition, which is Tianaba is one of the snake god in the Fulbe, the Fulani mythology. He really loved the West African cultures to a point that he was dedicated. He dedicated one of his editions to one of these concepts in the Fula people. And from then, when the Cahier started with when he was still at the University of Antilles, Guyane in Martinique. So he had a partnership with the linguistic department over there, and it was sponsored with the university. And because of a lot of changes in policy at the university, he withdrew himself and was working as an independent entity, working with people from Buenos Aires, in Argentina, but also people in Cameroon, Mbongi, people in now university in nowadays Egypt also. So this has become really international, even if it was Caribbean based. It has become like a really international journal with Shomarka Keita. Dr. Keita he's also on the committee. And from then, been like more than 20 years of publications. He decided before passing away to continue the journal, but to have it into electronic version only. So the reason why, even if it was like well distributed, like in like main European universities, like it is recommended in a British Museum, in Cambridge, etc. But one main reason he wanted to reach out, especially for people in poor countries, for our people, especially in Africa, in the motherland, who can't afford with small budgets. They cannot afford like having all the documentation and to be shipped to them. So he wanted to have something electronically available. So they're going to be two for the moving forward. They're going to be two versions. So they're going to be, first of all, the immediate in English, but it is a small electronic version with a smaller paper, still going to be peer reviewed with a team, this international team, with all a or paper related to not only science in Africa, but in Egyptology in Africa also. And the second part for the cahiers are still going to be around, but under an electronic version. So we are still figuring out and making sure we're going to have the appropriate website, because so far it is still under Dr. Karine Gadré. She's a French Egyptologist and also a astrophysicist. She did her PhD in both. So she still hosts a majority of the documentation to be spread around, but we are thinking of having a website dedicated to it, with the PDF article going to be available, digital object identifier, DOI, going to be also there. And so we're working on that part. So the journal, following what Alain desired, we're still going to have the journal, but we're going to have a PDF version and an online version only.
I appreciate it. Now, you mentioned Dr. Shomarka Keita, who we've had on this program 3 times technically, but 2 of those interviews are online now. The 3rd one is only available to the Patreon, and he's talking about race and the biology of race in this conversation, but that's available to the Patreon. But besides that, shameless plug, you have co-authored a response with Shomarka Keita and another individual in regards to a latest, ancient DNA study. And can you tell us a little bit about, the initial study itself, what you all found problematic, and your response to, that study?
Okay. So to preface everything, so as I was saying, ever since I was working for my PhD in marine glycobiology, I've followed all the scientific articles related to ancient DNA peopling. So I've been following everything ever since what has been published. So that's by my own, and I've been publishing some articles with Alain in Alain's journal in French, and back then, and I've been commissioned by the UNESCO to write one of the chapter about ancient DNA in Africa. So this is going to be out in the future. Oh, thank you for putting that out. So so I've been following all these and looking at what has been published, and I have an alert when something gets published related to ancient Egypt and DNA popping up all the time on my email. So when this paper got out, just based on the title of the journal, if you can put it, the title of their publications, just above, this one, if everyone can see, So it was shocking to me seeing the increase of sub-Saharan post-Roman. I'm like, doesn't make sense, because so far we have to be also fair. There are not a lot of data out there. So we have to be agnostic and say what is out there. What we know prior to this article, we know based on some ancient publication that were finally changed from one of the Pope of a ancient DNA called Svante Pabo, Dr. Pabo. Pabo said back in the 90s that he was able to clone some of the DNA from some really early period, some fragment of mitochondrial DNA, and he found that that this segment look like what is found in Central Africa. And this paper was not published in accessible to everyone. It was published in the British Museum, one of the journal that the British Museum had. So if you're trying to look at it right now, it's going to be really hard because you will have to dig or to go or to ask at the British Museum, or have some specialists getting it for you. But he mentioned that and he was surprised. When I emailed him back then, and that was like back in early 2001, something like this, he told me that there was a lot of mistake, there was a lot of contamination, and this work is not great. So now there are better techniques. Moving forward, I think it was like in the 2000, there was a paper published about Italian biologist, and she found out that some of the pre-dynastic mummies had some sickle cell signatures. She was not able to go further and to see which haplotype. So just long story short, there are different types of sickle cell that is found right now. You have one type called the Benin type, mostly found in Benin. You have the Cameroon, mostly found in Cameroon. You have what they call the Bantu one, Central Africa. You have the Arab Indian one, and the Central African one. So 5. So there, but these scientists didn't go further based on the techniques she had. But still, we see that, and there is a paper actually recently out about sickle cell that might have originated in tropical Sahara. But we had that. And we have some people like Eric Krubezi, who's a medical doctor and anthropologist in France, in Toulouse. He had extracted some ancient DNA from necropolis, Adaima, in southern part of Egypt. And he has found some signature that you can find, some mitochondrial DNA signature that you can find only in East Africa and also in South Africa. But this paper was not, it was also a communication in a specialized journal. It was not a peer-reviewed like this paper. So apart from that, you had some other paper coming out, but taking just more recent from the Roman era, and that's all. And recently we had a Zahi Hawass, who wrote an article about King Tut and other, like possibly Akhenaton and other, but he didn't disclose all the data. Me and Schumacher, we did a reanalysis of this data, and we showed with using some programs that are available here that it is some of these markers are commonly found in tropical Africa. So long story short, I just give you like the general background to show that the scarce data that are there before this paper, they all show that there is a deep, that ancient Egypt, at least for those samples, were deeply rooted. Oh, and there is a last step that I didn't mention. There is a paper from one of the, somebody who was in my PhD committee, who worked on Christopher Sola. He worked from Paris, from the Pasteur Institute. He worked on the tuberculosis that he found in the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and the Old Kingdom in Egypt, are found also in West Africa and East Africa. So even if we don't have a lot of data, it's really a lot of information by sickle cell disease and some mitochondrial DNA show that there was this African input. So when this paper got out, I was like, doesn't fit with what has been published before. So let's go further into the data. So the first thing that jumped, it's the way they turn in the paper you see they talk about like 90 samples, and it's 90 mitochondrial samples, and they talk about more than 1,000 years of history, which is not true when you go into the detail of the data. It's they blended a lot of information that don't make sense. But long story short, in this paper, they had only 3 individuals where they use the full genome to analyze, and it's from one area in Egypt, in northern Egypt. And it's from the oldest sample where they have the full genome. If my memory is correct, is about like 700 BC. So long time after the beginning of ancient Egypt. And even though within those 3 samples, if we dig and look at the Y chromosome, so that the father gives on and on from the paternal lineage, we find also this tropical African signature. So we found this marker that is present in all from South Central, Southeast Africa to Northern Africa. So even within their sample, they don't disclose everything properly. And often in those papers, you have to go in the details. So, and that's something I mentioned with everything, not only this paper. When something is published and some journalists like talk about like some new discovery, you have to ask yourself, what is the sample size? How many people were studied there? And but even before, that's one thing. Who funded the study? Who funded the study? How many people? How many samples? What is the sample size? What era? Which city? So you have to have that in mind when you analyze. So if we go now to what we wrote, and we tried to talk directly to the editor of the journal and mention all that, because we are not the only one. We are not the smartest scientists in the world. We are scientists. We use a scientific method like everyone, but we see clearly that this paper was out, but the sample size is too small. They use a lot of blend a lot of data that don't make sense in the history of Egypt. They criticize past result about King Tut, and they say that this method is flawed, regardless of other people using the same method with crocodiles, ibis, and other mummified animal without any issue. So what is funny is those methods can be applied to other animals, but when you come to humans, it's like, this is not possible. So there is all these like background and interpretation of result that can be criticized, and we were surprised to see that this paper was out, and we can look at the commentary from the reviewer from the paper also, and some reviewer ask the same stuff also, but regardless, majority of the reviewer sided and the editor sided with this group, and the same old trope of the so-called Islamic slave trade is always taken into account to justify some tropical African input in Egypt. So it's really flawed in two different levels, and what we did here was just at the surface, because we could have gone about why do they use only the Yoruba people as quote-unquote sub-Saharan? Yeah. Why they didn't take people from East Africa to compare? So there are a lot of stuff where the data are screwed in the interpretation, and you can see that either it's total ignorance or it is done with some under some reason that are not that are close to colonial mentality.
Yeah, it seems like a uphill battle just to demonstrate the Africanness of the ancient Egyptians, and they'll try to find every little nook and cranny to make a larger argument in which the overall evidence doesn't support. And it's like they want to bypass how the Egyptians, first of all, depicted themselves, in the literature, and then make it seem as if these are the same people who, we see in the Middle East today. And so when we look at the people in the Middle East today, it is not representative of at least the artwork that the Egyptians, drew of themselves in those times. But even then, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying, don't get me wrong. I mean, we know that from the get-go in northern Egypt, that northern Egypt was the Delta particularly was cosmopolite. We know based on and even within the Hyksos era, there are some articles related to archaeology that shows the type of pottery and the type of a cultural artifact that you find there. You find like Nubians people were also in the Delta, and you found some artifact from people from the Near East. So there are some parts that are really cosmopolite and it's cosmopolitan, which is totally true. But the way they describe, it's generalizing one part with the foundation, the beginning of the ancient Egypt civilization, and that's the big issue. Like, I would not say, and I think a Dr. Christopher Ehret said that also in a video recently, that you will not take the Plymouth cemetery and take this cemetery over there in Boston, for instance, and say, oh, the whole U.S. or the whole Northern America were people from Ireland. You will not say that. It's very simple. So it's the same issue. But go ahead. Sorry.
No. It's before I go to the next thing, have you heard of, and I think this is, I think this is the final version for publication, at least the one that I have, an article, a journal article. What does it say? The spreading of parasites by two human migratory activities. I'm gonna share it with you, and I'm if you haven't seen this, I'll send it to you, and then we can find the published version. But I want to get your opinion on what you think this would mean overall. This is. Okay. So
the schistosome Manzoni.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm winning about it. It's a schistosome.
Yes. And so I wanted to read this particular part right here. Oop, let me go back. Oh, where did it go? Oh, let me just do this. Okay. And it provides a map that says African schistosomes. And I brought this up because you mentioned like things like sickle cell and how diseases can help to trace, migratory patterns of human beings. And so it says these figure 2, which is this right here, and we see this genome, this pattern here, coming from Central Africa going to Egypt. But it says African schistosomes have evolved in the region of the African Great Lakes, from where they have been spread along the Nile. It is likely that the schistosomes have been dispersed to West Africa in the course of the Yoruba, quote unquote, mass migration the orange arrow, and further to Central and South Africa in the course of the Bantu migration, yellow arrows, originated in the Mediterranean region. A Dua Denali has been introduced into North India in the course of Aryan mass migration. Okay, so that's something different. But we see here, you know, this schistosome originating in the Great Lakes, ending up in Egypt, and then from here going into somehow into what is now Nigeria, and then spreading with the Bantu speakers down south. So, are you familiar with this study and this
So
research?
I'm not familiar with the study. I would appreciate if you send me the reference. Okay. But I wouldn't be surprised. We don't know the timing. That's also like one thing. But there were one thing that we have to remember. The way we look at Africa right now is not the way it used to be.
Yeah,
a lot of places like we have not mentioned the mega Chad, which was in nowadays like part of Chad, Cameroon, where you have like this huge lake and you have a civilization over there. You had a lot of lakes and different lakes and rivers interacting. And you have a lot of evidence of Africans using boats to navigate. So a thing that seems for us like impossible, because you see that how come Guyana you have a desert, now you have like really long distance. We have to remember to use this multidisciplinary approach when you think of the African history, and see how, and this is like I think if this is correct, one way because of the human and this type of parasite that are specific to human. There is no other way that they have been spread. So it's really interesting. I would be interesting to see about the dates and what are the estimation using like what we call a method called molecular clock. It's just a way to estimate based on differences on the mutation on different parasites when people have migrated. But this is highly possible.
And another reason why I bring this up is I don't know if you're familiar with the linguist out of the Republic of Congo by the name of Jean-Claude Mbongi.
I heard of. I'm not familiar with his work. I heard of him, but I'm not familiar with his work.
Okay. Well, he looked at the analysis of Teofilo Benga in his 1993 work, where he introduced the concept of a language family called Negro-Egyptian. And, he revised it, using a more rigorous method or whatnot. And his conclusions, well, part of his conclusion is that the language family or the essential arguments of Diop is valid. And so he kept the label Negro Egyptian from Benga, and that, the origin of the language is in the Great Lakes region, and that it divides into two different major dialects after a certain point. And which he calls the Behir and the Bere dialect. And these two dialects, of course, have been, interacting with each other for thousands of years, not only in the Great Lakes, area, but then eventually at different times, they're moving down the Nile, into Egypt. And, some, kind of spreading, like, just like with Diop's work, he made the argument that the Sudan was the dispersal point. And what I add to, his analysis based on my own work is that, some of these Negro Egyptian speakers moved into the Sahara when it was green. And when like a branch of those, when it started desiccating, it was pushing everybody, down and about. And so this is when you get this repopulation of the Nile Valley, and then shortly after, the development of Pharaonic Egypt. But there are some who came, and settled in what is Chad. Some came through Nigeria, and then this is the group ultimately that spread and became the so-called Bantu speakers or whatnot. And so when I saw this, I already have some other evidence that supports that linguistically and archaeologically, but this would seem to add credence to, it's just a matter of, again, the time period, as you mentioned, when that happens. But so that was one of the reasons. But so with you not being familiar with his work, I would have to go into a whole explanation of
I'm not a as a for the linguistic parts.
Yeah,
I'm not as good as Alain Slair. I know some stuff that he taught me, and I know people are different. You have different classification and different ways to classify.
Yeah,
there is one way to compare things, and which is like I think where I hope a future linguist and future people who are interested in the history of Africa would go is into the informatics. So the linguistics and informatics, and having like agnostic reasoners using databases with a different languages, and using some of these laws of in linguistics. And when you have some letter that changes from one language to another, to be able to reconstruct, and using machine learning type of informatics to rebuild this stuff. So there might be a way in the future to harmonize, I would say, everything, like to harmonize what a Mbongi is saying compared to Eret is saying compared to a Takax, because all of these different linguists and historians are using different parts of ancient Egyptian language and the language that they know the most, and they find a lot of similarity, but everything goes back to Africa.
Yeah.
However you take it. And that reminds me of what one stuff Alain was telling me, a lot of people were like offended when they remember that the people are using still the Afro-Asiatic and as instead of Negro-Egyptian. And we can debate on the term. Some people don't want to use the word Negro. Some people just want to use African, or just use Afrasian, and so on, like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The fun fact is the Semitic languages that are spoken in nowadays Africa, and the diversity based on this concept, where you have this huge diversity of languages, of Semitic languages, you find them in Africa. We have to reconcile that part. I don't know how, but there is all this Semitic branch that is deeply rooted in Africa also. And
that's something that is really quite easy. See, the problem that for those who are in opposition to like Afro-Asiatic and Niger Congo and whatnot is that, you as a scientist know that, the scientific method in part is designed to falsify hypotheses, to eliminate chance as an explanation for any kind of patterns that we see in our experiments. And so when you do the mass comparative method, it does not allow for you to eliminate chance, eliminate borrowings, or whatnot. And so when the labels and the phyla that were developed from that methodology, dozens upon dozens of linguists around the world who have examined it have found it of non-scientific value, with the exception for some reason of people who are the disciples of Greenberg.
Yeah.
And so, even with that, like even with Christopher Ehret, going back on an earlier hypothesis that he had to come to the conclusion that Obenga did, that Semitic did not originate, on the continent proper of Africa, but in the Levant. And Jean-Claude Mboli has come to that conclusion. And, there's a number of linguistic reasons why this is the case. But to the machine learning, issue, I published a book this year titled Towards a Comparative Dictionary of Chicam. Chicam is the word for Kemet in the Chiluba Bantu language. And modern African
language.
Yes. And that is exactly my aim. So, I put together my comparisons in just one text with that I've done over the years. And, with the advent of going through it again and correcting any errors, but because, my background is computer science.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. The objective is to create an online database with that in mind, that, we have people computing this information, that we have a certain set of, variables to equal the IPA symbols and all of this, and then record the sound laws and the equations for that. And we see what the machine can turn up, based upon, our input and things of that nature. And that's where it's heading. And it's actually been done for Indo-European, Proto-Indo-European.
I saw an article about that. So that's
So I was like, this is what we need for the African languages. So I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah. And and there's a lot of borrowing, like also like I remember Alain, he did one stuff that is like really mind blowing to this day for me. It's the comparison of the pair of homophones.
Yeah.
So he did it like for the ear and the thighs.
Yeah.
And how, for instance, and how in different languages, different branches of African languages, they'll have the same word to explain the same concept wherever you are in Africa and within Egypt. That's really mind blowing. Like even if you have different languages, you have the same concept, the same universe.
Yeah. Matter of fact, that's I would encourage you to get Jean-Claude Mboli's book, even though you're not concentrated on linguistics per se. What he would the word that he uses for that concept is called a semantics. And he's saying that the semantics is ultimately what solidifies a language group belonging to each other. And so semantics has to deal with a people's worldview, their inner logic of thinking, and how they map that to words. And so those homophones that you would see, in these various languages that Dr. Anselin would see, it can be explained once you do the reconstruction process. And he shows how like a lot of African culture emerges as a result of these homophones that are linguistically separate terms, but because of the culture of African people that looks for synthesis of things, they will synthesize these concepts. So it's just like when you see the word the goddess Ma'at, you will see her sitting on a platform, and then with her arms spread out, and you see wings,
the feather,
and then the feather. And so there are different words in the language that have the same consonant sequence, because of course we don't know what the vowels are. One for wind, one for feathers, another one for base or pedestal, and then of course the word for truth, justice, reciprocity, stuff of this nature. So when you see the iconography, of the goddess Ma'at, you're seeing that synthesis, based on this phenomenon we call paronymy, based on that the homophones of those words and the coming together. You find this practiced all throughout Africa. But those ultimate semantics is what connects the people. Like when you want to defeat somebody in an African language, the word used in a lot of these languages is a word for eat. Like like it's like literally I've eaten you, in this. If I've run past you, or what I'm saying, if I did better than you, I've eaten you, and it's that kind of inner logic that you'll see, within those languages or whatnot. But yeah, I would love your opinion, once you have read.
It looks like it's really interesting, and it is. I would love to use that and to map it also with other parasite, because that's one example. But if you compare it with other parasite that are strictly human born, you should see similar mapping.
Yes,
so that's really interesting.
Okay, I'm gonna ask some questions now from the audience, and so the first is going to be from Non-Swirl Zone, who gave a donation. He asks our guests, is there any research with natural wild herbs that might be good for the human body? So how does herbology, correspond with your scientific research in these things and health?
So what I would say, there are research ongoing research. Everything that we know are based on I won't say not everything. The foundation of pharmacology is based on ancient knowledge. So to a point, in French Guyana, French scientists are working with indigenous African people and native people to know about which plant they'll use for different types of tropical diseases they have, because they have mastered that. So they are trying to find which molecule or which sets of molecules might be good for a certain cure. So some people are working on that. Problem is, you have to be vigilant when this kind of thing happen, because you have a lot of knowledge that is going to be stolen and used for some pharmaceutical companies. So that's where it's really important for native people and Black African people to have both the modern scientific knowledge and also to know about traditional medicine, because if you know which herb that might be good for XYZ, you might not know which concentration, and that's when the modern chemistry can help you. So there are definitely work going on this. I don't know any type of white herb by myself, but there are a scientist working on that part. And actually in Guadeloupe, the island where I'm from in the Caribbean, there are one chemist and pharmacologist who's working on traditional herbs, and trying to see in general what type of herb that you may use for different type of diseases. So there are work out there that are peer reviewed, and that goes like also into the detail about at the molecular level to know exactly which one. So there are work out there. I cannot point out right now from the top of my head, but yes, some people are working on that.
All right. We have from Shezmu Patah, what is your understanding of prokaryotic and amniotic cells?
So I'm not understanding. The amniotic cells are cells related to pregnancy. That's one thing. And prokaryotic cells are a cell like bacteria, eubacteria, and archaea, which has unicellular organism. So I'm not sure of the connection here. I don't know if was you're talking about something related to pregnancy and to microbes. I'm not sure, so I cannot really answer because I don't really get the question. If you can reformulate.
Yeah, he'll have to reformulate the question because he asked some other stuff and it just
Okay.
totally off at all though. So we're gonna leave you be for a moment, Shesmu Patah. We're gonna go now to Melanated Goddess, who asks, what does our guest think of the keto diet, which is a low sugar carb diet? Is that healthy for African people?
So I would tell you this is not my specialty. I don't want to say something that is like off the chart about that part. What I know, what I've reviewed so far, and which is related to the microbiome, the high fiber diet is really helpful because a lot of our gut microbiome, they'll feed on those dietary fiber. So I was in a conference like today, and where they showed the importance of the high fiber in our diet. And what I would say also, we need to get more data related to our people, and a lot of data that are available there about health, they don't include enough of Black people. So we have to be within those studies, but we have to know what's going on. So it's like this issue because of our past and how people have been treating us as a guinea pig in science, that I know that people have some are scared on what people are doing in science, but we have to learn more about the scientific process and be able like to participate to those studies and get the benefit, the outcome of this study. So I would just say like I know better about the high fiber, and that is pretty good in general for everyone. I wouldn't go about the keto. I don't know much more about that part.
Alrighty. Continuing on sugars, why does diet soft drinks taste sweet but labeled 0 sugar?
Okay, that I can answer because it's about yeah, I have to know my boundaries. I don't want to say I have to say what I know and be humble on that part. So we have in our taste buds some receptors for sweetness, and you have different molecules that exist actually, which will mimic the structure of sugar, even if it's not sugar, but it will taste like sugar. So it will be like 0 calorie because when we metabolize those drinks, the molecule that will bind to the receptor for sweetness, they don't give any energy. So it will feel like it's sweet, but it's not actually doesn't contain any sugar. So it's like mimicry.
What's your, are you familiar with biomimicry?
Yeah.
And, what's your take on that?
I mean, there are so many like biomimicry at the.
Yeah.
I mean, we can spend a lot of time talking about it. At the molecular level, for instance, and to wrap it up with what you just show about schistosomiasis, it's really interesting how sometimes some parasite, they'll have a molecule that will mimic what we have to avoid being attacked by our own organism. So, for instance, some of those parasites might have some of the sugar that we have also, and they will tell when they infect our body, we won't be able to attack them because they look like us. So you have the biomimicry that can go like to the molecular level or also like to the macromolecular level. It's really interesting.
I have to learn more. It's almost like those fish that can change colors, in the oceans or whatnot.
Yeah.
Just in our bodies. Narada Tisdale. I'll make sure that I send you
the link.
The article, saying for that as well. And he's in the medical field, Brother Narada.
Yeah, we need more like you. And thanks, Asal, for doing that. That's what we need. We need to reach out.
Indeed. I am not Pablo asked, what's the name of that Svani Paabo paper? Has he disavowed it completely?
No, he has not disavowed publicly. beside, like I said, some email we exchanged, and he told other people about that part. I have the paper. If you just give me 1 sec,
No
and I'll be able to share it, to share the name of it.
All right.
Give me a sec. We can keep on while. Yeah.
Okay. The Jasmine Red asks, have you done any research on Yemen and Oman, especially Yemen? I'm assuming some DNA, or at least have you researched any DNA studies?
So I have not worked on. I've read a lot of paper related to this part. So there are a lot of interaction with East Africa, and so to a point that I think Dr. Keita, he often refer to the supra-Saharan when he talks, for instance, of a people that you find in like the Mediterranean area back then, like 5,000, 10,000, 5,000 BC. We who have some of the marker that you can find also in tropical Africa. So there is a lot of interaction between Yemen, Oman, and with Eastern Africa.
All right. I don't know what the context of this question is. I guess this is a continuation of that earlier question, but it says sweet and low, are they byproducts of? Can you be more clear in your question, Donnie Williams? And I'll re-ask it. So
just to answer the question about a Pabo, the paper of Pabo, and it's with another scientist, female scientist, Anna Di Rienzo, and it's called A Molecular Approach to the Study of Egyptian History.
Okay, and molecular approach to the study of Egyptian history.
Yeah. Okay. And the mummy, I can tell you which dynasty exactly. I'll tell you. You can go ahead.
All right, no problem. If you can type it into the, you can share your screen if you're on a computer.
Yeah. Okay. Let me do that. Just 1 sec. Yeah, I mistakenly shut the. So you can keep on.
Okay.
I'll share once I just get back again.
This will be the last question. Any knowledge of human demodicosis linked to fibromyalgia? Much appreciation to this wonderful guest, and thank you for listening and watching.
Thanks. This is not my specialty, neither about fibromyalgia. I don't want to say some stuff that I don't know much more about. So I can look it up. I can refer you to some articles. What I would suggest, if you're looking for just like in general, you have medlineplus.gov. So it's one of the key reference from the National Institute of Health, and you can find in layman's term a lot of information about like general, instead of just Googling some stuff where you can have like XYZ having their blog and talking about on medline.gov, you're gonna have like some vetted by some professional information if you want to have that. Let me share quick.
Okay. Yeah, the share screen will be at the bottom.
Yeah.
You see it, and then you can either share the tab or just your entire screen. All
So here it is. I don't know if you can see.
Okay, hold on. I got to add it. So there we go. Yeah, a molecular approach to the study of Egyptian history.
Yeah. Right. So in this one where there's just a little I forget which Egyptian which dynasty, I forget exactly, but it's like from the beginning. Naked Ankh, the Middle Kingdom, here from the Middle Kingdom, and this one, and just to show you this is what he did on the dendrogram to see how close. So you have like what is in black. The black dot is what you can find in sub-Saharan Africa and Egypt, and what he was showing, I think, like you have like some common ancestry. And yeah, I think that's this one where he said that when he work on the reconstruction, it was saying that it is some marker that you find in sub-Saharan Africa. That's also a term that I was discussing this morning. Okay, that's all. You get it?
Yes, I got it.
Okay,
and appreciate that.
Yeah, so. That's another term that Schumacher could like talk many hours about, this colonial concept of sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah. If you look into when it was the first time it was used, is like pretty recent, and there is no reason beside talking about like Black Africa. I mean, it's Africa. You know, the Berbers, wherever they are, like white or black, they are African. That's something that we have to remember also. Anyways.
All right. And it seems like for Donnie Williams, he was actually responding to a person in the chat. So it wasn't
okay.
For you. And so is it probable from what you've seen that the Bantu once dominated Northeast Africa? Linguist Ferg Somo says that there is meta-nature that reads Bantu.
So I'm not into linguistic. That's mainly for USR, I think.
Yeah, and that's a long discussion.
Because isn't Bantu a anachronistic term if you want to talk about Egypt, ancient Egypt?
Well, it depends. And see, and that's one of the things that I'm going to be addressing in the documentary film. I've already written about it in the book that was released this year and under Chiana Into. And this is where the discussion on the comparative method and mass comparative method becomes essential in these particular arguments. Because when you use a comparative method, you see this kind of close relationship between Bantu and Proto-Bantu in ancient Egyptian. And how I would word it is that Egyptian is a type of Bantu or I just call it Into language unto itself. It wouldn't be a part of the group of Bantu speakers that you find in the Democratic Republic of Congo or amongst the Zulu. It's just a type of Bantu language unto itself. And we have our linguistic reasons for making that particular argument. And so it requires us to abandon the labels that were created by Greensburg for scientific reasons. And then, once you have gotten in your head that there are some serious problems in the organization and labeling by Greenberg in that school, then you are clear to, do the work from scratch and make the comparisons and the labels and to see what these languages are really, about. And that's what people like Jean-Claude Mbongi becomes very important in this particular conversation. So, but his argument and my argument as well is that you have Bantu speakers who was part of many of the different speakers who ended up in the Nile Valley. Some ended up uh, in the Green Sahara and moved down. Like there's different branches of them, and they begin to evolve in a certain way in terms of the language we're talking about. That becomes what we see proper today. But what became ancient Egyptian, and then, for example, the Sumerian language, that was a different type of Bantu. That didn't have the great elaborate noun class system because of the interactions that they were having with other, groups of people. So you got to have language contact studies, and this is something that even Anselin in his article on the pool of African languages, that he wrote for that conference, Egypt in its African context. If you're familiar with that, that's something that is discussed in there. But it's not heard of. So that's why when I first saw that study of the schistosomes or whatever, schistosomes, that it if it's within that time, that general time period, it would provide even more evidence of that. Because he's arguing and I make sure that I separate. I don't argue that you can use genetics to make linguistic arguments, and so those are two separate things. But it would be kind of, indirect, evidence, along with some other things that would have to coincide to make that a full argument. But you see, it's the same patterns that we've been able to detect linguistically, coming out of the Great Lakes region, because that's where he's arguing that the Bantu languages started. And so that's, again, it's a whole different linguistic argument. So yeah, that's something that is not part of biology. I'll let this one, since he's not in your field, but he's in the medical field, I'll let him get this last one, and then we're going to end the program. So this is from Narada. Can you elaborate on your understanding of the human microbiome and its role in the immune system?
Yeah.
That's a lecture.
So so far what we know, there are some stuff I'll tell what we know. It looks like the microbiome has different role, and there is one role that we have. It's like training of for tolerance also, for some microbes. So we know that you have some microbes that will generate an immune reaction. So based on the type of the way the baby will be given birth. For instance, if a kid is born naturally, vaginally, compared to a kid who was born with a C-section from the same mother, for instance, there are studies that have shown that the kids who was born with C-section will have more asthma, and there would be like a lot of issue with exacerbation of the immune system, compared to a kid who was born vaginally, who's already in contact with microbe. It looks like our own immune system is like being trained to fight and to tolerate certain microbes. So far that's like a small picture of like the world of the microbiome. And there is actually one of the so-called Pope of the microbiome world, Rob Knight in San Diego. He wrote a book called "A Dirt is Good" and how it is important, contrary to the popular belief of like being super sterile and have everything wash hands. We have to wash hands. Don't get me wrong, especially right now with this COVID crisis. But having your kids playing with dirt, and there is nothing wrong with that part, being accustomed to some germs, to a point that in the microbiome world now, a lot of American and European, they'll go to see traditional hunter-gatherer in Africa to collect the fecal microbiome, to look at the microbiome diversity, in order to try to implement and to get that through some fecal transplant, and to repopulate with good bacteria, because of the westernized world we live in, we have lost a lot. So some people are trying to find out, like, to go back to the original, quote unquote, like, no, I wouldn't say original, but a more traditional microbiome that is more sane. So you can go online. There is a lot of, like, available on YouTube videos from Rob Knight, like the Knight, Knight. So they have a lot of videos that explain, like, in layman's term, or you can go even, like, more deeper into it to see the importance of the microbiome. So yeah. So even there, to come back to wrap around, you see how traditional knowledge is important. So you have to have both. Don't ditch tradition, trying to understand tradition, but go into the science. It's really important.
Ladosha Wright says, my mom encouraged our dirt pies and pretended to eat them.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of good stuff, and of course there are some stuff that are damaging, but there are a lot of studies that have shown, comparing, like, kids from Sweden compared to other kids, like in a different rural area in Pakistan, how their gut microbiome is different, and how they have less asthma in Pakistan, rural Pakistan, compared to some kids in Northern Europe who, like, live in a really sterile environment and so on. So we have good microbes. They are important. They are there.
All righty. And I want to say, Sister Ladosha, that I did receive your gift, to the channel the other day. Just wanted to say thank you, and thank everyone who has been listening live here. And then, of course, all of you who are catching the archives. I want to thank our very special guest, Dr. Jean-Philippe Gourdine.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Asa, for doing that.
And yes, and we still have more questions. And so, unfortunately, I can't kidnap them, saying all night. So, maybe
my wife is gonna be mad at me if I don't take care of the kids. I also have another hat. I'm a dad.
Yes, I understand. So, we thank you greatly for taking time out of your busy day to share your knowledge and wisdom with us. Is very much appreciative, and as we can see from the chat, they're very in tune and listening and interested. So hopefully, for those of you who are listening, you may be a bit encouraged to dig more deeply into biology, in particular, and science, the sciences in general. And also, you may have made the connections that you can use these types of sciences to answer questions about ancient African history and culture. So if Nile Valley studies is your thing, you may want to jump into this in genetics and the like, to be able to answer certain questions of the peopling of the Nile Valley and just the migrations of African people in general. And so we hope that you have found something of value and inspiration in this conversation. And so to please continue the conversation, please share and like the video, leave a comment in the comment section. And you are on social media. If they wanted to ask you a question, how could they do that?
So I am on, so I have like my professional Twitter account that I use for science. So this is where you can ask me some questions. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put it on, I'm going to send it to you.
Send it on the chat now, and I'll post it on for everyone to see.
Where is the chat box here on the comment?
It should be on the right hand side.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Yes. And, again, thank everyone who has made a contribution to the channel. It is your contributions that keep the channel going and allows for me to, introduce and have these deep, meaningful conversations with the community and to have these special guests. So thank you all for what you do and your continued support for the channel. And so this is his professional Twitter. And so when you want to have those deep scientific conversations about microbiomes and sugars and, and more, that's where you would go. And then he also has a personal Twitter where you can contact him at this particular address. So, thank you again for being, open to the community and for the work that you do.
I see some people say, yeah, I said fecal transplant. Yeah, this is a thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, fecal transplant.
Yeah,
that's something to look up.
What I could do also on the chat, I'll post some links to some articles and some videos about the microbiome in layman's term, and some stuff that some studies that are of interest.
Have you? I know I said that was the last question, but this is my personal last question. Okay. Have you considered writing and summarizing about the studies that you have reviewed over the years that you talked about earlier, that you get these alerts for, these genetic studies or whatnot?
Yeah.
And to try to make it make sense for the public and, your commentary.
That's one stuff. And that's one stuff. I'm really bad as scientists, and that's one stuff that we have to do, and that's great what you're doing right now for this interaction with the public. I have to take some time and write down all these pieces of information in simple terms, because I see what is his name again? I'm blanking on his name. There is another archaeogeneticist who wrote a book, how we got there. What is his name again? I'm blanking on his name, but he wrote a book about all the archaeogenetic studies, and even he himself, he claimed there is no so-called sub-Saharan Africa gene in Egypt, in ancient Egypt. So I have to personally take some time when I take a sabbatical, and dedicate some time to communicate more with the public, because what can happen and what is sad with that is you have people who don't know much more, and they'll claim a lot, and they don't know all the details, and they'll be made fun of because they don't have all the knowledge. And when these kind of thing happen, we leave a void that can be filled by people who are charlatans and who are saying, a lot of BS. So that's on my list. So yes.
All righty. Well, thank you again for joining us, and again, for the people who will be continuing on this channel on Sunday, we have Dr. Sadiqa Watson, mathematician, data analyst, and statistician, continuing in the Black Science Month tradition. She's also a co-founder of Black Science Month, so we'll have a conversation with her. And then on the 29th of this month, we have Dr. Wade Nobles, revolutionary psychologist coming out of California, who's going to give us some up-to-date on the work that he's doing, in the community and whatnot. And of course, if you want to contact me for any reason, you want to argue, don't mean I'm argue back, or ask any questions, you can hit me up on these social media platforms, and of course my website. And if you want to, contribute to the channel, here's the Cash App, and you could do it, via the website as well, Asarim Hotep. So with that said, y'all have a good night. Enjoy your Friday. Continue to wear your mask and wash your hands like you're supposed to. And I will see you all y'all may see me tomorrow night. I may do an impromptu show on the Black Panther 2 film and to ask the public who should play the role of T'Challa now that our good brother Chadwick Boseman has passed away. So that'll be on tomorrow evening. If y'all want to join the conversation, hit me up and I'll give you the link. So with that said, y'all have a blessed night and we're out.